Good morning, everyone. This is Ron. It is Saturday morning, a little after 10 a.m. So, if you want, we'll start with the questions. I'm going to read something first, and we'll go from there. A lot has taken place this week, and so if you have any questions about any events or anything you'd like to share, please feel free. And then I'm going to read this verse in Acts 11 again, and we'll pick up. I'll ask a question about that. Okay. So, is there anything that you have that's outside of this verse, Acts 11? Any other verse or anything else that you want to speak about? And then we'll go into that, because we want to look at that a little closer today. Okay. But is there anything else that has grabbed your attention this week? Okay.
Ron, I
Very
have.
good. Yes, ma'am. Hi. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry. Fine. Um, I found it interesting the amount of snow that it has covered the top of the U.S. The amount of snow that fell. I found that to be interesting, and I don't know how it's spiritually connected. I just found that to be really interesting. One place got 71 inches, which is over 6 feet, and I just found that to be interesting this week.
I did as well, and I don't have an explanation. I do also find it interesting, the weather patterns in the last 5 years or so seem to have changed in the South as well. And this coldness that we are experiencing now before December may be where it's supposed to be. It may be things are balancing themselves out, or maybe it means something totally different. But I too have noticed the weather patterns, and Pastor or anybody, do you have any explanations or any insight into what you may see in this?
Suppose that the weather patterns are indeed changing, and they are beginning to change in the southern corridor first, and we'll move beyond this area as balance enters the earth, and the area where the snow is always gotten snow early, but not this much. And that's the amount that they got supposed to just speaking to the climate or the earth fighting back as a result of the damage that has been done to the earth and its atmosphere. And now that we are recognizing who we are, we're able to bring balance in this creeping that area. Suppose that's the truth. That's how things are working out now. Indeed, if that's what the case is, we should see this amount of snow, but then over a period of time of the winter, we should see lesser amounts as opposed to these monster storms, because that amount of snow is no different than a Category 5 hurricane. The earth is crying out, mourning, waiting for our redemption. That's how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you. The first thing when I saw it on the news it was a cleansing thing, and I thought surely I did not hear him say 5 or 6 feet, but indeed he did say that, and I thought of cleansing. The other thing that I noticed was, if you noticed last year this time, and specifically in the South, there were so many heavy storms, tornadoes and whatnot, that they ran out of names. And although we have experienced some, not to the degree that it was a year ago. So I took it, not knowing what to make of it, but I took it as something positive. And so, yeah, thank you. I can readily see what you're saying there. Anyone else? Has anyone else had any thoughts about that? We're talking about the weather patterns that we're experiencing now, not only in the South, but throughout the Americas. If you've been paying attention to the amount of snow that has been dumped on the Northeast and Midwest. So,
Good morning.
anyone?
This is Barbara.
Yes, ma'am.
Morning.
Good morning.
I want to add to what's already been said. We've already talked about changing from one world age to another world age, the Aquarius. And at the time of this change, however long it takes to go through, there are things that happen in the earth realm which are almost cataclysmic, because sometimes it takes cataclysmic kinds of things to shake people up, to get them to consider something different from the lock set of their minds that they've had in the past, whether it, and particularly spiritual. It takes the dark night of the soul kind of thing. Something has to happen, unfortunately, for a number of us to shake us up enough to be willing to consider something beyond ourselves. And so this is just, we're still in that process. We're still in that process of changing from one age to the other. And the important thing, as Pastor said, is we got to stay the course, because if no one stays the course, we're going through this stuff for nothing if no one makes a move toward understanding who they are and understanding that they are in light, that they're light.
Thank you. I like that. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah. Good morning, Ron. This is George. Good morning, everyone. I too concur in terms of what you mentioned in terms of your understanding about the weather changing. You saw it, being good. And I think that, we all, can appreciate, when we see situations occur, in the universe or, in our experiences in living, that, we're able to appreciate, to look at it from the good, because it's teaching us to, or more importantly, it's humbling us to realize that, they say to everything there's a season. And so I think that we can learn from the experiences that we bear witness to for the purpose of looking at it, as you had mentioned, in terms of being good. I know there was a gentleman that was speaking in Buffalo, that was saying it's something that, they, are accustomed to in terms of getting snow, but it was, again, not a situation of panic or not a situation of, feeling hopelessness, but just being able to realize how do we see it in terms of working with nature and learning from nature, and just, appreciating, the opportunity just to be able to love one another, to be able to comfort one another, and looking at what we talk about in terms of balance, in terms of harmony, unicity. So, I, again, just concur with you where, again, to look at it from that aspect of goodness, I think that's helpful. I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Anyone else? Many years ago, we started a journey. It started off with looking at the Zohar, and I remember we were reading these books and trying to gain understanding into spiritual things, and trying to understand Hebrew. And before we even started with the Aramaic, we didn't even know much about that at the time. But one of these books that I didn't understand that sat on my shelf for years is a book. I think either Pastor had it first or one of you guys had it first, but someone told me about it, and I ended up getting the book. And one of the things I read I remember reading this early on, and it was one of the few things I understood in the book. But it said that it was talking about dreams specifically, but it was talking about a righteous man being able to interpret things and set courses for things. And that stuck with me. And I hesitated with that, but I never forgot it. The reason why I hesitated with it is almost like calling myself Elohim. I didn't dare say that I'm righteous or unrighteous. That was not for me to say. But I never forgot that. And usually now, if I have a dream or see something I don't understand, I'll try to see something positive in it. Not necessarily trying to shape it, but to see the positive in it. So, with all of the comments that were made, I agree with, and I think that the beauty of it is we all kind of reach a same conclusion without even talking about this, knowing this question was going to come up. But just what you experience internally and what you said kind of touches and agrees with every, the words that everyone else said. So I like that, and I like Barbara's analysis of the changing from one dimension to the next. That makes a lot of sense to me. So, is there anyone else that would like to add, or maybe even see something different in that in the question? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. And what you read, Ron, about the righteous man, I would change righteous man to gentleman. In my kingdom, there's a big difference between a gentleman and a man. I would say, like Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson is a gentleman. As a husband and a father, he's a good father. And not only is he a good father,
George, I hate to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me a second, please. There is a huge difference between a gentleman and a righteous man. King George was a gentleman, considered a gentleman anyway. A gentleman, application is made of a gentleman based upon his status in society, not based upon his actions in relationship to society. Thomas Jefferson was considered a gentleman, but he was as unrighteous as you can be based upon the enslaved people that he owned and the way he treated them. So when Ron is talking about righteousness, it's not something that we can disagree with, because it's the scriptures that talks about the righteous man, not us in our kingdom or us in our church or us in our group. Now, whether or not someone is a gentleman is based upon how you as a person perceive them. That is a title. That is an adjective that describes someone based upon how you see them, through not only through your eyes but in society as well. Can you see the difference?
Anybody else agree with Reverend Richard?
No, I'm asking you, can you see that difference?
Based on your translation, Reverend Richard, yes. I can see.
No, it's not my translation. Yeah. No. Please don't do that. It's not my translation. The Bible does not mention gentlemen. The Bible only talks about righteous men or unrighteous men. And our trajectory is to deal with those things which appears in the book of that's been set aside for us to understand the universe as well as ourselves. So this is not about descriptive words that men have given us. It's about, when we talk about descriptive words that men has given us, that's when we begin to see the difference between Christian and the Scriptures. That's when we begin to see the difference between Baptist and spirituality. So it's not about my interpretation, my translation. It is about the reality of what the Scripture says versus an English word, an English description of a man who has money. Thank you. I hope that helps even better, even more so.
Yeah. And also, if I may interject in reference to what George mentioned, the Scripture does say that the effectual and fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And I think that in terms of not looking at it in terms of denominations, but just the effectual prayer and self-consciousness of a person, availeth much. And I think that that's, what I, come to a point of understanding is that it's not, as I said earlier, so much in terms of religion, but your effectual consciousness, your effectual, thought or spirit that availeth much. So I don't know if that helps, but I think that I look at it from that perspective of what you're saying. I'm done.
Thank you. George?
I will agree with what Mr. George stated and you stated and what Ron read. A righteous person will maneuver differently than a person who is unrighteous. It's just that gray matter in between that. What's really righteous? What's a righteous man? What's an unrighteous man? What's a righteous person? What's an unrighteous person? So it's just that little gray area, if there is gray area, in between unrighteous and righteous. So I get down with what everyone's saying. Thank you.
George, I love that. I like that you took it there, and cause that's worthy of discussing. What, for one thing, that there is no gray area, and that's that's a good observation. And that is the simple concept that I think we have been trying to point out for years now, and even more so as we mature into what we see, becoming what we see. There are no gray areas in truth. There are only gray areas in religion, and those gray areas are maneuvers that you can twist things around to mean what you need them to mean at any given time. But in truth, there are no gray areas. And I like what George read about the fervent prayers. That speaks to the fact that Ramil asked a question, and look at where it ended up. Because at the end of the day, what we are saying is righteousness is a responsibility in the earth. It's a responsibility, not only to yourself, but into the entire universe. You are the mature one. You are, and I'm talking spiritually here, not age-wise, of course. You have a maturity. You're at a place of understanding. You're at a place of consciousness that understands the plight of man, and trying to set things on the right course, trying to bring about understanding that betters all mankind. So with that, when I talk about that responsibility of the righteous man, you're not trying to shape it, but you see the good in it, because no matter what happens, whether or not it's a tornado that destroys a town totally, there is something in that. As Miss Barbara said, there is a transformation taking place. And we have all talked about and mourned those who have left the earth during the pandemic and through other means, through all the violence in the earth. But we also see the transition that is taking place. So the righteous man doesn't say, woe is me in those. He moves to see the higher ground, is what we're saying. So I the question, and of course all the answers as well. I don't stop anything else if there's someone else who may want to respond. Okay.
Well, with me, Ron, is just thinking about this and mulling it over in the last 2 or 3 minutes. Everybody righteous. Man, God dog, to me, it's hard to see. It's hard to see righteous if everyone in the room is righteous. Yet it's easy to see righteousness in a room when the room is occupied by unrighteous. Or if everyone in the room is unrighteous, who's really unrighteous? You get a group of thieves in one room, who's really unrighteous? So that's just, it's kind of difficult for me to see who is really true blue in a room full of righteous people and who is really righteous without some kind of calamity. Because
righteousness. I want to answer your question. Let me preempt it by saying this. This is one of the reasons we are so adamant about exposing Christianity for what it really is, because it has done a job on our thinking. It has totally destroyed our understanding of the African way of looking at life itself. The ontology of the African has been obliterated because it does not seem to be important. And the danger in that is that every time I open my mouth and say something like that, there are those who feel like we putting everything on the race base, where everything is based on race, including the scriptures. The only reason that we are Christians is because it was a method of control and manipulation, and I'll get into that later. Now, to answer your question, because of what was previously said, based on what was previously said by me just now, the concept of righteousness is a problem because we have been taught to view it from a Christian perspective, from a church perspective, and not from a scriptural perspective. Righteousness does not mean that you are perfect or without entanglements, or meaning righteousness does not say that you are without sin. Righteousness is predicated upon knowing who you are, how you treat people, and how you process things. How you if you know who you are, and I'm not talking about Elohim, if you know that your desires are to follow the principles of the scriptures, and you make an effort to treat everyone the same without regard to how they treat you or anyone else, you see them as you, and you make every effort not only to live by the principles of the scriptures, but to be a mirror for others to do the same. Yes, you make mistakes. Yes, you do things that are contrary to some of those principles. However, forgiveness and repentance are the key to making sure that you correct those mistakes. Unrighteousness is when you don't give a rap about anything. Unrighteousness is when you pretending to be living according to the scriptures, when you're actually living according to a doctrine that was written by men, as opposed to a doctrine of spirituality. That is a real problem. And unrighteousness is teaching someone the scriptures are based upon servitude as opposed to the scriptures based upon salvation. All of our lives, we have been taught unrighteously, not because the people who were teaching was unrighteous. They were doing what they felt was the right thing, the righteous thing. Their teachers were unrighteous, and they were given to those who sought to be righteous. And they ended up teaching in unrighteous doctrine. And that is the reason we are in the predicament that we're in and have such difficulty understanding, explaining, and processing an Eastern understanding of spirituality itself, because people in the East were not religious until Islam and Hinduism and all these other things came into play, or when they were labeled as being a religion. If you go to the beginning of Islam, you will find that Islam is not a religion. It's a way of life based upon your relationship, your submission rather, to Allah or to God, based upon your interaction with your fellow man. So righteousness and unrighteousness are based upon how we deal with each other. Does that help you, George?
Very much so. Thank you very much, everyone.
Sure. You're welcome. Ron?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Anyone else like to comment on the question? Ms. Famil, how does that explanation sound to you? Does that help?
It does. It really does. I do want to ask a question about what we were just discussing, see if I really kind of understand what we were saying. For example, I happened to catch Mike Pence's comments on his books, and they were specifically asking him about the day of the insurrection in terms of when he chose not to say that he was not going to override what the country had voted. In that action, Sage, is that what we're talking about, or anyone? That's where, even though he has the Christian concepts, it was a righteous behavior or action was when he chose to uphold he believed about the Constitution not giving him the right to override the election? That being a righteous act? That's my question.
So would you like to address it, please?
Hang up and try again. If you need help, hang up and then dial your operator.
Stop.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again. If you need help, hang up.
Are you guys still there?
We're there. I think we dropped 2 individuals were dropped for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give them a minute to come back in.
I think one of them is Sage. I don't see him.
Okay. See his number there.
Ron, we can come back to that if we want to wait a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to read something to you, and I would like him to answer your question and see if he had any other questions. But on Monday night, we talked in detail about Acts 11 and 26, and I was going to read that again and see if there are any questions about it. We were going to probably pick up there today and look at that even a little closer. So, Pastor, are you back?
Back, yes.
Okay. Before we get into to go any further, then were you able to hear Vermille's question?
No, that's when it went off.
Okay, Vermille, if you don't mind, ask your question again, and we can go from there. Thank you.
Okay. When we were talking about righteous man, that the concept of righteousness, would an example of that be the action of, oh my gosh, are
For
then
example, Mike Pence did.
Say again? I'm sorry.
What Mike did when
Yes. Yes.
Okay. No, that is not righteousness.
Okay.
Why? Because he was perpetuating a system that demeans people, a system that does not recognize the humanity of mankind. It does not recognize the reality of what, quote unquote, the reality of what the scriptures are saying versus his mode of Christianity.
Okay.
What he did was political, and he did not do it for the righteous reason, for a right reason. Mike Pence did that because he wanted to save his political future.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Good question. Good question, though. Anyone else? Questions or comments?
Hey, Ron,
yes, sir.
And I think with righteousness, about 2 weeks ago, a driver called me up, and he said, "Hey, quick, I got a blowout on my truck, and it kind of dismembered some parts of the truck." And he asked me, he said, "Do you think I need to take it by the shop?" I said, "I wouldn't take it by the shop, but you need to take it by the shop." And he asked me, he said, "Well, why wouldn't you take it by the shop?" I said, "Because it wouldn't affect my psyche." It's affecting your psyche, so you need to take it by the shop. So is that a righteous maneuver in telling him that, or was that just? I just think when you're righteous, it really limits your options. This is one thing that I like about math, chemistry, science, and the nursing field. Ain't nothing but one answer. Well, really two answers. Either you're correct or you're incorrect. So I just feel that when you maneuver righteously, you limit your choices. Yet when you move in,
I see it, George. I see it just the opposite. To me, if I'm moving in the right direction, meaning I want to pursue truth, that does not limit my options. That gives me options of truth. That, as you talked about the gray area before, that eliminates all that stuff. righteousness to me, and I think Pastor explained it, I guess, in my own words, you're moving to a place that you're doing what's best for mankind. You're pursuing truth. And in that pursuit, you move past any selfish desires or thought. Because let's face it, we all grew up thinking being saved meant you. I was being saved through my religion had nothing to do with saving anybody else. Everybody else had to do it for themselves. But being righteous, what you see is I am you and you are me. And that responsibility or obligation looks to you and say, this is my brother. I have to reach out to him. I have to lend a helping hand. If I see that a shining light or something that is true, I have to share it. And being righteous is not so much doing it just out of obligation, but doing it out of love and the pleasure and the desire to reach out to all of mankind. So when we talk about that, all those things that we started off with in the beginning, the love and the compassion and the forgiveness, those are the things we're talking about. Those have to be the catalyst for your searching for truth and moving forward. You see? So that's what we're talking about here. Your motives, your heart, and I don't know if somebody can help me out if you can say it a different way. But that's what I see. I don't see it as a limiting anything.
Ron, I agree with you. But my question would be this. If righteousness limits your options, what does unrighteousness do?
It should increase your options. And Reb,
No. How so?
Well, too many decisions is not a good way to maneuver. You got too many decisions you can make. And I just agree with Ron and what he said on the opposite end. When you maneuver righteous, there's really only one way that you can do it.
Hey,
there's really only
no. Just because you're thinking like a Greek, you're thinking like a Roman, you're thinking like Europeans. There is no fluidity in the thought of Europeans. Europeans do not process in a fluid way. Their thought processes do not flow. It's either one thing or another. It's yes or no. There's nothing that flows between those. When you look at righteousness, it is very fluid. When you look at the decisions we make in regards to righteousness, it's fluid. Even unrighteousness is fluid, because there are times when a person who is totally unrighteous does a righteous thing. So there's an ebb and flow. However, if your established desire, and I'm talking about established within you, if your established desire is to function in a righteous manner in the realm that we call earth, then regardless of how you move in this life, you are still righteous even if you do something that's unrighteous and repent for it. Why? Because there is no perfection in this world. As to the limitations of righteousness, there is absolutely, positively no limitations to anything that's spiritual. In regards to unrighteousness is a thought process that seeks to undermine everything that's spiritual. Unrighteousness only sees itself. It sees it is selfish, it is greedy, it is aggressively brutal. All of these things with unrighteousness, because unrighteousness is not based upon Scripture. Unrighteousness is based upon selfishness. So if there is a limitation, and I don't believe it is. But if there is a limitation, it would be on unrighteousness, not righteousness. And too many decisions do not run a person. They don't. Why? Because every one of us on the face of this earth have decisions to make. And the number of decisions that we have to make is based upon how we live our lives, the choices that we make, the people that we interact with. An example of that would be if I were living in a place in the rural where nobody's there except me and my family, then the decisions I have to make are limited. However, once I leave that space and go to the city, now my decisions are unlimited. The reason they are limited at home is because I have chosen to limit them by not venturing out beyond where I am. You cannot move about in this earth. You can't even think about anything beyond yourself, and not go beyond. And not be making decisions that has no end. So everything we do, including getting up in the morning, putting our shoes on, or putting our socks on, that's a decision. So these decisions, we are full of decisions that needs to be made. The approach to the decisions is what determines whether or not we make the right decision. And the purpose determines whether or not we make the right decision. Can you see that, Mr. George?
Reb, I agree with you, and I go back to the example you gave a long time ago of Bill Gates gives $10 million to South Carolina State University, and he's only doing it for a tax write-off. It's not a righteous maneuverability. Is it a good act? Yes. Yet it's not a righteous. And what Ron said, all of it goes back to the origin of your heart, what you're doing. Yeah, I agree with you, boss.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Let me back up. I don't want you to agree with me. I want you to understand what I'm saying. Because agreeing with me is relative. Understanding what I'm saying is beyond relativity. It is something that has an effect on the journey that you take. You understand the difference?
I understand what you're saying, Reverend Richard, and I also agree with you.
Okay. Because and let me carry this a step further. We have been teaching for as long as I can remember. And I don't teach, and I know, and the rest of us, we don't teach to get agreement. We teach to get understanding. Because understanding is what changes your life. Agreeing with me does not. Because agreeing with me doesn't mean you understand what I'm saying. Agreeing with me, because it very well means that I respect you and I don't want to challenge you, or I don't know how to raise the question. So understanding is primary in what we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Sheldon. I had a few comments.
Sheldon?
Hello. On the agreement part, just for anyone else and just for more understanding, pun intended, agreement is to say that Reverend Richard, Pastor Richard, or anyone else is correct or was right. When he talks about understanding, it is impactful in your life in a way that it changes your understanding of who you actually are, which is something that is totally different and beyond. It has a material direct effect on your life, and like I said, who you are, but in terms of how you see yourself and how you relate to yourself, which is totally different. In regards to George's first comment, and George, this is not really directed to you. This is just for further understanding, I guess, for everyone who was listening in on the call. The idea of something being super defined, black and white, right and wrong, yes and no, or completely binary, as Pastor Richard said, was more so of what the Romans intended as they belittled or dehumanized their citizens, their subjects. We talk about being like that of Jesus, and we talk about being Elohim. We talk about being God's, etc. Well, with all of that I just mentioned, the idea of what is going on, and we mention all the time, is being creators. There is no creation in just black and white if something was automatically defined and automatically set out to be a certain way. With creation comes discovery. So all of this that we are going is a process of learning. If you had a child and you only told that child what to do, what was right and wrong in life, and there was never a lesson behind it for them to understand the reasons why, etc., in a sense, that child would never grow. The only thing that child would do is have a certain set of rules to automatically abide by. And in a sense, that child would become less human. It is with the lesson and the understanding and then being able to make decisions going forward in the moment, depending on whatever is that child encounters. It is what is helping that child to be a creator in a sense and know who they are and have more of a deeper understanding going forward. The elements of just right and wrong, black and white, etc., are more so building blocks or principles that make up everything, but it's not the same consciousness and creator in a sense that you are. Those things bend to your will and your creation. Finish.
Thank you, sir. I like your explanation. I especially like the example of the child. That's clear. We can see that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So, Shell.
Glad to hear too. Yeah.
So, Shell, education teaches you how to think, or is supposed to teach you how to think. Then spirituality shows you how to create.
Yes, it takes it a step further, because with what education teaches you, in a sense, from, like you said, thinking from the mind, where spirituality takes that a step further or a step deeper, in a sense, where you are more so operating, thinking from the heart, or thinking from your connection more so as being a creator. Every thing, in a sense, that the mind can think of, and everything that is in the physical realm, in a sense, has its origin internally from a spiritual standpoint. Finish.
So if spirit feeds the mind, in a sense, spirit has the opportunity, has the propensity to feed the mind if we let it. It can put things in us, ideas, thoughts that we hadn't even thought about. So that indicates to me that spirit is the source of everything. And if that is true, then the opportunities and the potential of spiritual things is unlimited, whereas the potential and opportunities of me thinking from just my own mind have limits. Is that what it is what that's saying to me? And so if I do things within the confines of only my own mind and my own, what I think are my own thoughts, that limits me. But when I open myself up to receive even more from the universe, then I have that opportunity. I have that, if I have that will, I have that opportunity to create infinite amounts of things. And so when we were just talking about the things that you guys were and George were talking about, then righteousness is a means, is another way of how I think and how I act on what the principles of the Creator are. Then the building blocks, if you will, the spiritual building blocks, infinite for me. And so when I think about all things work together good for those who love the Lord, who are the called according to its purpose. When I am the called according to its purpose, that means my intent, my motive is right. When I allow myself to be led that way, my motive is right. And so even if I don't see the big picture, and even if I make a decision that seems not to be the right decision for that person, if I made it from the motive of being open to all that I am as the essence of the Creator, I might not, or that person might not see it working out in the near term, but in the bigger picture, on retrospect, we can see how a lot of things that we've done has worked out for our good and for someone else's good, because we based it not on our own self, but on something bigger than we are, on the essence of who we are, if that resonates.
Good morning again, Barbara, and everyone. I again concur what you're saying. If we look at it from the Kemetic and the Kushite teachings, just going back to the beginning, it talks about education, in terms of, Dr. Hilliard, it mentioned that the ultimate aim of education in Egypt was for a person to become one with God or become like God. And it talked about, the path to the development of a God-like quality was through the development of the virtues of spiritual wisdom. And so when, you speak, in reference to us coming out of our unconsciousness of the Greek philosophy or religion, we're now coming into a self-consciousness in terms of not only who we are, but being able to understand those principles or those utterances that, our ancestors gave us to be able to appreciate balance. And I think that this all, as we mentioned earlier, all works together for the good, but we're coming into that truth, which helps us to be able to now establish our foundations where there's nothing new under the sun, but we're able to appreciate the journey that we're on now in terms of coming into self-consciousness versus being unconscious about something that we, that was there, but we have a desire to seek the truth. And in seeking the truth, we have better understanding and wisdom, and now how to live in this world and not be of it in reference to the teachings that might have been misleading. I don't know if that resonates, but I think that the whole aim of education was not in the literal sense in terms of academia, but your spiritual continence, you know what I mean, or your spiritual self. I may say, I'm done.
Thank you, George. That is exactly what I'm saying. When you're educated from the physical perspective of this realm, is totally different than being educated and imbued and filled with spiritual wisdom and knowledge. So thank you.
I think,
Barbara,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sheldon.
Ms. Barbara, with the example that you was giving, I thought, well, with what you were explaining, I thought of an example that everyone should be able to relate to, and it's that idea of when you are very upset, angry, or just bothered in some type of way, or really, really trying to accomplish something, to do something, to think of a solution to something, and are completely unable to do it when trying to accomplish that from the thinking aspect, or using, traditional education that we will speak of, versus just sitting back and relaxing and perhaps just, letting it go, et cetera. And it's during those times when we are the most creative, or we have these epiphanies, or these like little genius moments, is because we are opened up spiritually and opened up beyond that of just thinking. We have a much deeper access to wisdom and understanding, whereas when we were just concentrating on that regular education, we were cutting ourselves off. It's that idea of sometimes just being in flow. In that particular moment when you're in flow, that's when, in a sense, we have opened up our thinking to a much greater mind of spirituality. I'm finished.
Thanks, Shell. That's what I'm talking about. It's like Kathy once said something related to this. It may not be the exact same thing, and Kathy can chime in if she chooses to, but she likened it to sitting with something, just sitting with it, meaning not necessarily worrying about it at all. That's not what sitting with it means. It means meditating and being open to whatever the universe, whatever answers the universe has, or whatever the universe wants to show you. So yeah, thank you for that.
And I agree, Barbara. You summed it up beautifully, because it just brings you to a place, and for me, to a place of acceptance where I'm not troubled by it. I'm not going to fall apart over it. I sit with it till I get to a place of comfort with it, and I accept that whatever the universe is bringing my way, it's okay. And that's exactly what I mean. So thank you for bringing that point in as well.
And I would like to go back to something else you guys said that I thought was very important. All of it was important. But that part where you and Sheldon and George were talking about we live in a place of our mind, and we create and do things from a mindful place, and that is limited. But when we learn to move from our soul, and I'm kind of paraphrasing what I heard, it also feeds the mind and it makes it limitless. So that really kind of sat with me, and it made me think about the lesson we had some time ago, Barbara, when you talked about being equally yoked, letting the soul feed the mind, and that just expands you that much more, because that is a place of without limitation. So I enjoyed that. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Ms. Famil, I think that was your question as well. What do you think? What do you think of your answer?
I think I have better understanding as opposed to agreement. I like this discussion, really helped me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Is there anyone else?
Yeah. Good morning, Ron. Again, just something came to my spirit that I just felt I need to share. Some years ago, when the teachers came to Philadelphia, we went to a bookstore, and the bookstore that we went to, we all were looking, at books, giving thoughts to certain things in terms of just things that we might want to purchase or get. And I believe while I was with yourself and Pastor, and you guys, were looking at some books, and you came across one, that talked about Tehuti. And again, at the time, I couldn't see how this resonates to today, but just being in the presence of the Spirit, being in the presence of seeking wisdom and understanding. We talked about education, but now I can see how that has impacted on my journey. And I think for all of us, when we are in that oneness, to be able to appreciate balance and harmony. And I say that because, we're living in a time now, where we're able to appreciate the unity of the masculine and feminine energy, and that particular teaching in terms of Tehuti, I realize that it comes back to our ancestors, or it comes back to the teaching in terms of the principles of Mayat and Tahuti. But now that I look at it retrospectively, I think just being in the presence of something that I didn't quite understand then, and now being able to see the manifestations of how it spiritually has impacted, I think that's the beautiful thing about our experience together when we are walking in oneness, because we all now are getting it maybe at different times when it's supposed to be understood. So I don't think that there's no coincidence that we are talking about what we're talking about, but hopefully we all can be empowered to be able to appreciate our journey. So I just wanted to share those thoughts in terms of just some things were mentioned earlier about books or just being in the presence of one another. I'm done. I thank you for the session today. I'm done.
Thank you, George. That was beautifully said. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you.
Morning, this is Janice. George, can you give a brief summation of an overview or something of Tehuti, please?
Yes. In terms of looking at Tehuti, what it talks about in the Kushite and Kemetic teachings is that they were always balanced. Basically, when we speak of Mayat speaks of the feminine energy. It speaks of a goddess in terms of, beginning, as far as the nurturer, as far as the birth, of cosmology. But at the same time, there was balance that Tehuti, represented the male principle, which talks about wisdom. And so when we talk about, looking at it from the Godhead of God the Father, what I come to understand that there was a unified Godhead in the sense of the masculine and feminine energy. So Tehuti, speaks, more in reference to the 7 universal laws, when we speak of the Kabbalion. And I know that Pastor may be able to, share some further insight, but Janice, it brings to my spirit the importance of oneness. And so Tehuti was that masculine representation, in terms of the spirit. And then we have, again, the Mayat, which is the principles of how our ancestors were able to appreciate their journey of truth, appreciate their journey of what justice meant, at that particular place and point in time. It talked about the harmony between, the two energies, the balance. It talked about the order, the arrangement, morality, and righteousness, and reciprocity. And so again, I think in all of these teachings, Janice, from what I understand, it brings me back to the importance of oneness. And so with Tehuti, I further, have an appreciation that it wasn't just from a male perspective or masculine perspective, it was the two becoming one, if that helps.
Yes, that helps quite a bit. Thank you, George.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Thanks for an explanation, clarity. Excellent. Anyone else? Where are we? Anyone else? Any observations or questions that you may have?
I do.
Yes, sir.
What George said stimulated something in my mind. What George said really sums up what our desires are, and that is for a society that has the outlook on life that embraces the reality of a spiritual governance body that embraces the reality of masculine and feminine energy, realizing that there can be no stability without that, regardless of what your cosmology, regardless of what your outlook is. Thank you. And thank you, George, for bringing that up. There's a lot in what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I also want to go on the record and say that I'd like to go back to that bookstore. That's all.
Okay.
Actually, I was thinking the same thing. That was
not alone in that, huh?
that was a very
Mr.
I don't
Ron,
know. Yes. Yes.
I have a question to ask regarding
Okay.
righteousness. Okay, righteousness, does it change over time? And what I mean by that is somebody 100 years ago that may have many wives, and now today that's kind of frowned upon. Does that change, or is it consistent overall?
I like the question. Everybody, what do you see? Can righteousness change over time?
I want to hear someone else address that before I do.
No. Righteousness does not change over time. 2 plus 2 was 4 in 1920. 2 plus 4 is in 2022. Righteousness does not change. It doesn't change. I stand 10 toes down on that now. Righteousness don't change.
Okay. Thank you, George. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think it was maybe two different things that were, I guess we're looking at the moment with what has been said. As it relates to righteousness, righteousness doesn't become righteousness based upon a physical action that is actually taking place. So it's not as if we're just looking at something outwardly and saying that that thing is righteous or not. Righteousness, as we mentioned before, is a thing that is determined from its connection, for lack of better words, from an internal standpoint. So it is the more so of, I don't want to just say reason, because that just is making it sound like logical, but it is from the deep down place that that thing actually comes from, or whether or not it was allowed to come from a deep internal place that is true to who and what that person is. So as an example, when we have all, and even I go back to a child, have done something, or even as adults, where it really wasn't us, and it was something that was done quickly, that thing didn't resonate with us necessarily, where we may have been ugly or spiteful or something of that nature. it wasn't reflective, it didn't come deep down from the place of who and what we trust us to be, and from a very, very loving standpoint. It may be from a place of hatred, whether that is hatred for ourselves or hatred for others, wherever, versus us doing something that, trying to put all this in words, that came from a place deep down in our heart, from our connection with other people, and not expecting anything or wanting anything in return, but seeing or feeling our connection to them, even if we wasn't thinking about it from a logical standpoint at that particular moment. It's like we are giving gifts, so to speak. And we can go back to whether someone is being selfish or not. But definitely, like I said, for a lack of a better word, the reason behind the action, not the action in itself just automatically being judged or perceived from a logical standpoint, that anyone who does this certain thing is bad. If I see this action, this is bad, whereas this other thing isn't. Finish.
Okay. Thank you, Sheldon. One of the things I thought about immediately, and I agree with what Sheldon just said when he talked about the motives, and something Barbara said sometime a few minutes ago. You set your mind to do what's right from loving kindness. It doesn't mean that your actions are going to always, you're going to always do what is right. I'm reading Genesis 6, verse 9. It said, "These are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time." Noah walked with God. So as far as understanding was concerned, Noah had a better understanding, or he was at a place of consciousness, whereas he knew all that he knew in his time. I guess the righteousness that was in the earth, he was the one that really sought to understand truth and have a desire to do what is right. So as man has evolved, I take that in his time to mean that the evolution of righteousness, or the place of consciousness, has also evolved in man. And so maybe in 2022, Noah may not be as righteous as he was then, based on his motives and his desires. So, and Pastor, how do you see that? Am I on the right track? I think I'm agreeing with what I hope that's what Sheldon said, based on your motives and what your desires are will determine where you are in that regard. But righteousness is something that is, as far as consciousness goes, we go from one level of consciousness to the next. So it can not be something that is just still in the earth. It is something that grows with us. Is that safe to say?
I think the beginning question would be, why is it that righteousness does not change? And secondarily, how is it that Noah, during Noah's time, he was righteous in his time? First of all, righteousness does not change because it cannot. Righteousness is spiritual, it's not religious. So how could Noah be righteous in his time? Righteousness is always the same, but your approach to what is righteous is predicated on your environment. During the time that Noah lived, if indeed we do see this as a individual man, which it wasn't, during that period of time, there were less decisions that had to be made in regard to the people who lived around him or his environment. The righteousness of Noah was shown when he said to everyone is going to rain. and they ignored him, but that was a righteous gesture. During our lifetime, the approach to righteousness is not as it was with Noah, because Noah does not have a congressional body to deal with. Noah did not have the tenements of racism to deal with. Noah was not faced with the fallacy of Christianity. Noah was not faced with the manipulation of the minds of men for the purpose of enslaving them. So during this period, based upon our environment, the decisions we make are different, and that's what it was speaking to with Noah. Is that clear? Make sense?
It does.
It does, sir.
Thank you. Any questions about that? See, when we look at righteousness, earlier when I was speaking with George, I said that our view of righteousness basically is predicated or built upon what Christianity has taught us, what that righteousness is, as opposed to the Eastern fluidity of righteousness. That does not only apply to righteousness, it also applies to everything else that's spiritual, because everything that's spiritual flows. The Christian teachings are not designed to raise an awareness of God. Christian teaching is designed to diminish the awareness of God. There is no fluidity in Christian teachings. The apology of Christianity is based upon who's teaching it and for what purpose. So when we look at things like righteousness, repentance, prayer, all of these things have been shaped for us by those who were intent on controlling us with Christianity. Keep in mind, please, that when the African crossed the water and landed in this country, none of them were Christians. None of them were Christians. So if none of them were Christians and they were considered to be chattel property, then why would you endeavor to educate your property about Christianity when you don't even believe that they are, quote unquote, as human as you are? Why would you do that? There had to be a reason for it. And the reason for it had to coincide with making sure that enslavement was stable. I'm done.
So, Reb, to everyone, is it safe to say that now I stand what I say, righteousness doesn't change. However, it's the idea we have of righteousness that's going to change it. My idea of righteousness, not your idea of righteousness, vice versa. So, is it safe to say that what religion has done to us is warped our idea of how we should view righteousness? Is that safe to say or unsafe to say? Or are we just mentally lazy? We don't want to do no research on it. I think we're mentally lazy and we take what someone else is saying. Is that safe to say or not safe to say?
Pastor.
Oh, I'm sorry. The mental laziness. I don't see that through the way you see it, and the reason I say that is because there are to be those who teach as Jesus did the understandings of what's in the book. Jesus said, "I came to rightly interpret the law." Why was it necessary for Jesus to rightly interpret the law? It wasn't because those who we call sinners were interpreting it wrong. It was because the priests/pastors were interpreting it wrong. They were interpreting it for their benefit. So Jesus came to give an understanding that the tenements of the law are not based upon what the religious leaders say it is. It's based upon what the scriptures or what Elohim or what Adonai say it is. And when we look at it from that perspective and couple that with the understanding that the African was not a Christian, and there came a period when there was a that the white citizens and the slave owners became frantic about teaching Christianity. The reason that happened is because they had witnessed what Africans could do based upon their spirituality. There's a huge difference between religion and spirituality. Africans were not and are not religious. Africans are spiritual. They saw what could happen. What is not written about often is during the early stages of enslavement, there were rebellions, and the rebellions were based upon the African soliciting guidance from the ancestors in order to wage war on the slaveholders. And what made it frantic is that in 1804, AJ was freed from the French. His leader, Toussaint Louverture, was in a prison dungeon, a dungeon in France. So how did he communicate with the people in Haiti? They understood, they meaning slave owners understood that the way he did it was through an entity that's unseen and through methodology that they did not understand. And anything that white people don't understand or can't control, they seek to destroy it. There was a connection between the enslaved and the universe itself. So the slave owners thought to keep them away from their roots, meaning if you danced a certain way, if you sung in your language or language they didn't understand, if you played drums, you could be killed for that. So there came a preacher in Georgia named Charles Colcock Jones, and his express purpose was to teach Christianity to the enslaved. The way he did that was to preach to slaveholders, and in doing so, he considered, or he said what he could about the enslaved people, what he meant, and he described the enslaved as being boastful, lazy, and being sinful, did not know Jesus,
Yeah.
and being thieves. So they needed Christianity. And he said that when we give them Christianity, they will be wholly under our control. One of the things an excerpt from one of his sermons says, and having our plantations, the time and persons of our servants wholly under our control, we can arrange the manner and frequency of our instructions as we please. Meaning that we have them under control, so we can teach them what we want to teach them when we want to. And this was the major push to separate the enslaved from its roots and give it something that will control it and instruct it in something not only that will control the enslaved, but also will be passed on to generations so the enslaved could control their offsprings. And this thing that was given to them is Christianity. I want to read an excerpt that's kind of long, but I want you to listen intently at it, please. Indulge me for a couple of minutes. The plan is this. The planters form themselves into a voluntary association and take the religious instructions of the colored population into their own hands. Mind you now, he said religious instruction into their own hands. And in this way, as many of the association as feel themselves called to the work shall become teachers. An executive committee is to regulate the operations of the society, to establish regular stations, both for instruction during the week and on the Sabbath, and to appoint teachers who shall punctually attend to their respective charges and communicate instructions all together orally and in as systematic and intelligible manner as possible, embracing all the principles of Christian religion as understood by Orthodox Protestants and carefully avoiding all points of doctrine that separate different religious denominations. In other words, avoiding anything that will cause them to rebel, as did Nat Turner, based upon the freeing of Israel, of the Hebrews, from Egypt. So when I say that, it is very difficult for us to see differently. It is because of what happened to us. And right now, to this day, those teachers that he spoke of and the association that he spoke of is represented by churches now to maintain control over the population. This control is exerted by telling people this is your home church and nobody should be able to influence you to leave it. By exerting authority over people to the extent that they tell them anything that's not the Bible, you're not supposed to read it, like the Quran. If the Quran is so bad, when you read it, then you throw it away anyway. So these methods of control were taught to the leadership in the African community or in the enslaved community. And that leadership was trained to be a preacher who will only preach slaves obey their masters and scriptures like that, but would not preach about freedom. So right now, our minds are actually captured by the doctrines that were presented with the intent of keeping us in a position of servitude and seeing ourselves as less than anyone on this earth. And the other thing about that is this, subconsciously, African people in this nation worship white people. Let that sink in. How did that happen? The method was to present to the African a white Jesus, a white Moses, everybody in the Bible being white. And when they looked at the white male, the white man, they saw Jesus. Subconsciously, if everybody is white and they are superior, they are God, then subconsciously you are worshiping them. And that is the reason why we can be standing in a store and two white men are talking about how great Trump is and how despicable people of color are. And they're doing it in a loud fashion. And if we are standing in that very store and we are talking about the racism that's sprouted by Trump, then when someone white approaches, we either whispering or we stop talking. But we're whispering all the time because we don't want them to hear us. If that is not fear and an acceptance of inferiority, what is it? Recently, the Jewish community came down on Kyrie Irving and instigated the anger towards Kyrie, even in the black community, by saying that he was anti-Semitic. Kyrie says, how can I be anti-Semitic when I'm a Semite? That movie that he sent to other people had nothing to do, that he put on his page, had nothing to do with his opinion about it. If it was so detrimental, then why is it that Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, 3%ers, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, all of them can talk, say anything they want to say about Jews, and they don't censor them. So why would they censor Kyrie when he said absolutely nothing about it? Why did they not censor the writers of the movie or the producers of the movie or the distributors? Why did they choose him? They chose him just like they chose us during the period when we were force-fed Christianity. They would choose one to send a message to everyone else, and with the effort of reminding them of their inferior state and reminding them of the power that I have over you. They were buck breaking. Buck breaking speaks to the male slave being broken through beatings, torture, whatever. So our mindset has to be refreshed, not changed, but refreshed. And the refreshing of our mindset begins with understanding and embracing who we are, and began with understanding that Christianity is a doctrine of enslavement and servitude. It is difficult for most Africans in this country to wrap our minds around that, because the indoctrination has been 400 plus years, when Toussaint Louverture freed Haiti, what happened? They did it through the spiritual connections that they had with the universe. That's where they got their guidance. Right after that happened, France imposed a levy on Haiti that they had to pay them for all the enslaved people that they lost. And that continued up until, 2012 maybe? And from 1804 to 2012. How did they defeat Haiti all over again? They flooded it with missionaries who taught them Catholicism and the evangelical way of the Bible. That's how they did it. And they refused to establish any factories or production or manufacturers in that country and would not allow them to do it as well. That's why the poverty is there. And they put in place those who were Catholic/Christians in order to manipulate the population and enrich themselves from the money that the U.S. and Europeans were sending into Haiti. So we are in that predicament right now. The only difference is the missionaries who are continuing the indoctrination are not white slave owners. They are Africans who have an enslaved mind, who's every Sunday morning at 11 o'clock telling us that we are supposed to submit to the doctrine that enslaved us. When I had arguments with people about why do you have Jesus white on your wall in your church and all y'all black? Preachers got angry with me. Why does it matter? Color doesn't matter. If color doesn't matter, then why you did not paint him black? It's because you see black as being something demeaning. It's because you do not love yourself. You cannot embrace who you really are. You can't embrace your origin because you have submitted to the Caucasian for the purpose of being its servant forever. I'm done. Thank you. And I hope that it answers the question.
I don't remember. I didn't catch the voice who answered the question, but does that help any?
I think it was George.
There was a young lady asked a question about righteousness. Did we ever clear up her question? Was she finished? Did she get the answer? Satisfactory answer, I should say.
I think that was Mara's voice.
Okay.
Are you still on?
Yes, you guys answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. George, are you good?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, I think it's been a good day.
Question.
Yes, ma'am. Someone else had a question.
I want George. You also raised a question about the way we have been taught to view righteousness. And after what you've just heard, can you see the reason that we embrace righteousness and other concepts of the scriptures in a manner that is not conducive to truth?
Reb and the rest of you, I don't see all of it at this time yet. Wednesday, I'm gonna see a little bit more than I see today. That's my answer.
Okay. You didn't address what I asked, but okay.
I do not think that we are done, and we don't have to be. with looking at Christianity, how that has affected us. And as Pastor read from some of the sermons of this preacher, and he wrote other documents as well, other books that that talked about race, talked about skin color, and he did everything he can to kind of, in a way, change the DNA of who we are, for us to see ourselves as less than. And you think about how that has been kind of pushed in us for generations upon generations. It does explain a lot. So we'll, if you want, you guys desire, of course, we'll start tomorrow for questions or comments, but this we're going to leave open so that we can discuss this if and when needed, okay? So if there are no more questions or comments for today, we'll go ahead and take a pause and reconvene tomorrow at 11 a.m. So I wish you an awesome day. Thank you for your attention, and I love all the questions today. Thank you very much, and for those who answered, those were appreciated as well. So have a great day, guys, and I'll see you again tomorrow morning.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.